There are nights when the sky seems to breathe. The stars drift ever so slightly, as though remembering something ancient, something not yet complete. Across centuries of human wonder, one question lingers like a shadow beneath the constellations. What if a planet beyond our reach carries the story of our beginning and our end? Astronomers once traced faint irregularities in the orbits of Neptune and Uranus, whispering about a hidden body lurking in the far dark. Ancient tablets spoke of it long before telescopes existed, etched in the languages of Sumer, carved with reverence and warning. They called it Nibiru, the wandering world of the gods, the celestial vessel that passes near Earth once every 3,600 years. The Anunnaki, it was said, arrived from that world. They came down in the time before memory, shaping life, shaping fate. And every few millennia, the pattern repeats. A tremor in the heavens, a change in the earth, a cycle of silence and awakening. Whether myth or forgotten science, the prophecy persists. It bends through archaeology, astronomy, and faith, half memory, half warning. The question is not whether Nibiru exists, but whether it remembers us, too. Welcome to Deformed History. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. The first signs were not seen in the sky, but in the quiet dust of ancient libraries. Clay tablets, brittle and silent, began to speak again after 4,000 years of sleep. The Sumerians had written of a time when gods descended from the heavens, not spirits, not myths, but beings of flesh and brilliance, their arrival marked by fire and trembling earth. They called them the Anunnaki, and their home, the mysterious Nibiru. When Zecharia Sitchin first translated those lines in the 1970s, he claimed they held the key to humanity's forgotten origin. Most dismissed him as a dreamer, yet the words remained, carved in cuneiform long before any telescope was raised to the sky. Archaeologists unearthed more fragments, depictions of a winged disk crossing the sun, of beings measuring the stars with impossible precision, of humans kneeling before figures who seemed both regal and alien. The tablets described a celestial body that moves in a vast, elongated orbit, returning every 3,600 years to brush close to our world. Each approach, they said, brought upheaval, floods, storms, rebirth, and ruin. In their language, Nibiru meant the crossing, the point where heaven and earth meet. For centuries, these were only stories, whispered between scholars and seekers. Yet in the 20th century, strange coincidences began to surface. Astronomers noticed irregularities in the motion of Neptune, subtle deviations that hinted at a massive object far beyond Pluto's orbit. In 1983, NASA launched the infrared astronomical satellite, IRIS, to map the sky in wavelengths invisible to the human eye. When the data returned, one report spoke of an enormous object detected near the edge of our solar system, perhaps as large as Jupiter. The Washington Post printed the story. Mystery heavenly body discovered. It was quickly followed by silence. NASA retracted the claim, saying it was a misunderstanding, a distant galaxy, a trick of light. But for those who remembered the old Sumerian warnings, the coincidence was too sharp to ignore. The ancient texts spoke of a return, a cycle measured not in human time, but in cosmic breath. If true, then somewhere in the far black, A planet was moving toward us again, unseen, patient. Scientists called it Planet X. The faithful called it Nibiru. Between them lay the fog of modern doubt and ancient memory. Somewhere between myth and mathematics, the idea persisted. Astrophysicists searched the Kuiper Belt, that frozen wasteland of drifting worlds beyond Neptune. They found anomalies, odd tilts in the orbits of trans-Neptunian objects, clustered as if pulled by an unseen hand. In 2016, two researchers from Caltech, Konstantin Batygin and Mike Brown, presented calculations suggesting a massive ninth planet might indeed exist, its orbit so vast that it would take 10,000 to 20,000 years to complete a single revolution. They called it Planet 9, careful not to name it Nibiru. Yet the parallels were there. The ancient orbit, the hidden mass, the silent influence. Science and myth seemed to draw closer, though neither would admit it. In the desert of southern Iraq, where the ruins of Sumer still whisper beneath sand and wind, researchers once uncovered a fragment depicting the solar system, drawn with the sun at the center, surrounded by planets in their proper orbits. Among them was one extra sphere, placed beyond the known 8. Too large to be a star, too close to be mere decoration. The carving dated to over 4,000 years before modern astronomy confirmed the heliocentric model. Scholars dismissed it as symbolic. Others saw it as memory. As the decades passed, believers began to weave a larger pattern. They noticed that great upheavals in human history seemed to align, roughly, not precisely, with the mythical return of Nibiru. The flood that erased civilizations, the sudden collapse of empires, the unexplained shifts in Earth's magnetic field, the periodic mass extinctions that scar the fossil record. Each could be coincidence, but coincidence, when it repeats, begins to whisper of design. Some suggested that Nibiru's passage brought not only gravitational chaos, but something more subtle. Interference in the genetic or spiritual evolution of humanity. The Anunnaki, they said, had shaped early humans through direct intervention, mixing their own essence with the creatures that walked the earth. The tablets described how they fashioned man in their image, teaching language, agriculture, and the rule of kings. The very name, Anunnaki, meant those who came from heaven to earth. Perhaps, Sitchin proposed, we were their creation, a living legacy of visitors from a lost world. In laboratories and observatories, such claims were dismissed as pseudoscience. But in the silence of night, when radio telescopes listened to the deep background of the universe, there were still moments, strange signals, unexplained noise, sudden shifts in magnetic resonance. In 2003, reports surfaced of a mysterious object entering the outer solar system, tracked briefly before vanishing from detection. Officially, it was nothing. But unofficially, it reignited the whispers. Those who looked for patterns began to see them everywhere. The Mayan calendar's long count ending in 2012, the recurring myths of cyclical destruction found in nearly every ancient culture. From the Hopi stories of the red star Kachina to the Hindu Kalpas and the Egyptian cycles of Ra's rebirth. Always, there was the same idea. A returning world, a celestial rhythm, a cosmic reckoning. And still, the question remained, was it only myth echoing through time, or memory buried in stone? In 2008, the South Pole Telescope detected unusual movement among distant celestial objects, consistent with the gravitational pull of something large, unseen, and moving slowly. Some called it Planet X, others the Nemesis star, a dark companion to our sun. Astronomers debated. Theologians reflected. The distance between science and myth seemed to waver like heat above desert sands. For those who believe, Nibiru's orbit is not just a path through space. It is a heartbeat of the universe, a pulse that resets civilizations. Every 3,600 years, they say, humanity is tested, reshaped, reborn. The flood of Noah, the fall of Atlantis, the sudden end of the Bronze Age all align, roughly, within those cycles. Skeptics argue that such timelines are forced, imprecise. But the rhythm of destruction and renewal is older than any record. Even the Earth itself bears scars that seem to echo in pattern: impact craters, geomagnetic flips, mass extinctions recurring like echoes in deep time. To those who listen closely, the ancient texts are not warnings. They are memories written by survivors, survivors of a world that turned in the shadow of another's passing. Somewhere beyond the reach of our telescopes, a faint light may still be moving inward, unseen behind veils of cosmic dust. Perhaps it has no name, no destiny? Or perhaps it is the same celestial body the ancients watched and feared, the same that inspired their gods and myths. When a civilization remembers something long enough, it stops being history and becomes instinct. The sense of a great return, the dread of the sky, the awe of fire descending, is woven into our myths because it has never truly left us. And yet, there is another layer to the story. If Nibiru returns every 3,600 years, then what of its people? The Anunnaki, said to have descended in ships of shining metal, taught kingship, mined the earth for gold, and vanished again into the heavens. Were they gods or simply travelers? Some ancient carvings depict them with helmets and breathing devices, others with wings that seem mechanical rather than divine. If they were real, perhaps they watched us grow. Perhaps they still do. The prophecy speaks of a time when they will return, not as conquerors, but as witnesses, when the cycle completes and humanity stands at the threshold once more. Each era, it is said, is a test of what we have done with the knowledge left behind. And so, we watch the heavens, we build observatories, send satellites, listen for whispers in the static. Somewhere, a faint echo answers back, not in words, but in timing. The rhythm of orbits, the tilt of stars, the strange memory that humankind carries in its collective bones. What if the next crossing is not a collision, but a recognition? What if we have always been waiting, not for destruction, but for reunion? As the stars shift and the sky hums softly with the pulse of invisible forces, the thought lingers, suspended between faith and reason. In every mythology, in every prophecy, there lies a seed of remembrance, a warning that the past is never truly gone. And so, as the night deepens and silence gathers, one question remains, faint but persistent, echoing like the orbit of an unseen world. What if the gods never left? Long before telescopes mapped the heavens, before electricity or flight, a strange memory pulsed through the architecture of the ancient world. Temples, ziggurats, and megalithic circles all seemed to point somewhere, toward the same invisible geometry written into the sky. The Sumerians watched the horizon from Ur and Eridu. The Egyptians built their pyramids in alignment with Orion's belt. The Mayans carved their calendars with celestial precision. Civilizations that never touched one another shared one obsession: the movement of the stars, and something, someone who had once come from them. When the Sumerians wrote of the Anunnaki, they were not describing abstract deities of wind and harvest. They gave measurements, descriptions, names, genealogies. They spoke of Enki, lord of the deep waters, the scientist and creator, of Enlil, the commander and lawgiver, and of Ninhursag, the mother who shaped life in clay. They were not metaphors, but remembered beings whose actions seemed technological, not divine. The tablets described vessels descending from the heavens, fire flashing as they landed, dust rising like storms. The Anunnaki, it was said, brought with them knowledge of metallurgy, astronomy, and agriculture, then vanished back into the sky, leaving humankind to govern itself. It was Enki who, according to the Enuma Elish and later interpretations, took pity on humans during the Great Flood, a catastrophe said to have been caused when Nibiru's orbit drew close, its gravitational pull disturbing the Earth's balance. The flood destroyed the cities of the gods and the creations of man alike. Yet one survivor, Ziusudra, was warned by Enki to build a vessel and preserve life. Thousands of years later, the same story would be retold as Noah's Ark. Patterns like this ripple through all mythologies. Each culture calls the event by a different name, but the structure remains: a divine warning, a cataclysm from the sky, and a renewal of life afterward. Was it only symbolic, a way to express fear of natural disasters? Or was it memory encoded in myth, passed through languages like a dream that refuses to fade? In 1902, when the ruins of Nineveh were excavated, archaeologists discovered over 20,000 cuneiform tablets in the library of Ashurbanipal. Among them were fragments describing celestial mechanics and star maps more advanced than previously thought possible for the ancient world. One tablet, known as the Mul Apin, lists precise astronomical data: the rising and setting of constellations, lunar eclipses, the division of the year into seasons. Yet within those texts are also peculiar anomalies, references to the planet of crossing, whose path was beyond the known stars, and whose return heralded both glory and destruction. The question that unsettles scholars is this: how could these early civilizations know so much about planets that cannot be seen with the naked eye? Uranus and Neptune, for example, were unknown until modern times. Yet in the Sumerian diagram, they appear with approximate scale and order. If it was imagination, it was an uncannily accurate one. Those who study the myth of Nibiru often point to the strange synchronicities between celestial alignments and global events. Around 3,600 years ago, approximately 1600 BCE, several ancient civilizations faced sudden collapse: the Minoans in the Aegean, the Old Babylonian Empire, and the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. Around the same time, evidence suggests a major volcanic eruption. Thera, or Santorini, caused atmospheric changes visible as far as China. In the ice cores of Greenland, traces of ash and iridium tell of a global disturbance. Some researchers argue that a passing celestial body could have triggered gravitational stress within Earth's crust, unleashing chaos. Others see only coincidence. Yet the pattern is there, like a pulse buried in time. The Sumerians believed each return of Nibiru marked a turning of ages. Every orbit, they said, brought new beginnings and endings. The gods would depart, the earth would shake, and humanity would be tested. Their records suggest that the last approach brought the flood. The next, perhaps, would bring enlightenment or extinction. For centuries, theologians and scientists have debated the origins of these stories. Was it a memory of a comet, a rogue planet, a symbolic retelling of human evolution, or something more profound, an encounter too vast to understand, remembered as myth because language had no other form to contain it? When modern astronomers rediscovered Pluto in 1930, the world was captivated by the notion of an outer planet. Yet even then, calculations hinted that another, more massive body might exist beyond it. Clyde Tombaugh, Pluto's discoverer, continued to search for it until his death. Decades later, space probes like Pioneer 10 and Voyager detected anomalies in the trajectories of distant objects, small deviations suggesting an unseen gravitational influence. The idea of Planet X refused to die. In 1984, a paper in the Astrophysical Journal proposed that a companion star, perhaps a dim brown dwarf, could orbit our Sun at a great distance, disturbing the Oort cloud and sending comets inward in periodic waves. The authors called it Nemesis. The mythologists heard a different echo: Nibiru. Both carried the same shadow, the same pattern of recurrence and destruction. Science and myth, again, described the same rhythm in different languages. But what if the Anunnaki were never gods, never aliens, but something in between? An advanced human civilization from before the last cataclysm, their technology mistaken for divinity by those who survived. This theory, quietly discussed among archaeologists at the edges of academic circles, suggests that humanity has risen and fallen more than once. Each collapse erases memory, leaving only fragments, carvings, myths, impossible knowledge. Consider the pyramids of Giza, their alignment to true north within a fraction of a degree, or the megaliths of Baalbek, each stone weighing over 1,000 tons. Consider Puma Punku in Bolivia, where blocks of andesite are carved with laser-like precision. These are not random anomalies. They form a network of memory, a global whisper of something that came before. And in nearly every ancient language, the stars are called home. The Sumerians wrote that Nibiru was the seat of power where destiny is decreed. In the Akkadian texts, it was the crossing point between the paths of the gods. To cross Nibiru meant to cross between worlds, between physical and divine, mortal and eternal. If the Anunnaki came from there, perhaps their return is not only physical but symbolic, a reawakening of forgotten knowledge. In recent decades, advances in genetics have reopened old questions. The discovery of sudden leaps in human evolution, the so-called genetic bottleneck, and the rapid expansion of Homo sapiens has led some to wonder whether natural selection alone can explain it. The ancient texts speak of the gods mixing their essence with the beings of the clay, forming a new kind of life. Modern science calls it Homo sapiens sapiens. Myth calls it the creation of man. The line between them is as thin as dust on an old tablet. Yet for every mystery uncovered, there is always resistance. Mainstream academia views the Nibiru theory as pseudoscience, lacking physical evidence. NASA repeatedly states there is no known large planet approaching Earth, that no orbit would remain stable if such a massive object existed nearby. And still, the anomalies persist. The tilts, the alignments, the lingering feeling that something vast moves unseen. Perhaps what matters is not whether Nibiru exists as a planet, but what it represents. The forgotten rhythm of the cosmos, the reminder that civilizations rise and fall in tune with something greater. Maybe the Anunnaki were not extraterrestrials at all, but metaphors for the forces that shape humanity. Knowledge, ambition, destruction, renewal. Maybe the crossing is not celestial, but spiritual, the moment a civilization must face its own creation. Even now, traces of those stories live in the structures we build. The International Space Station orbits the Earth like a modern ziggurat, humanity once again reaching for the heavens. We launch probes toward the outer solar system, just as our ancestors once looked up at Nibiru's imagined path. The same curiosity, the same hunger to find our origin, drives us, but somewhere deep in the Earth's strata, buried beneath layers of silt and fossilized memory, there are signs of past cataclysms, massive floods, magnetic reversals, sudden climate shifts that erased entire ecosystems. The Earth has reset itself many times. If the ancients remembered such an event, if they saw the sky ignite and the seas rise, then perhaps they recorded it in the only way they could, as a story of gods, of return, of warning. The closer we look, the more the patterns blur. Science and myth circle each other like twin stars, each reflecting a fragment of truth. Maybe Nibiru is real, maybe it isn't. But what it means, that history moves in cycles, that memory is older than we think, that our world is part of something larger, remains undeniable. And as we map the heavens with newer eyes, we find that mystery has not faded. It has only grown deeper. Somewhere beyond the known, there may be a world moving in silence, following its ancient course, indifferent to belief or disbelief. And perhaps, as it once did, it will pass again. If it does, will we recognize it this time? Or will we, like those before us, carve its story in stone, hoping someone will remember when the stars move again? The night holds its breath. The orbit continues. The crossing awaits. The deserts remember what men forget. Beneath the dunes of Iraq, under centuries of silence and sand, the ancient city of Eridu sleeps. Archaeologists call it one of the oldest cities on Earth, the place where kingship descended from heaven, according to the Sumerian king list. It was here, legend says, that the first temple to the god Enki was built, a god not of thunder or war, but of knowledge, science, and creation. The tablets describe him as one who measured the waters of the deep and set in motion the calculations of the heavens. But when modern archaeologists excavated Eridu, they found something curious. Layer upon layer of temples, built one atop another, each more advanced than the one before. Over 5,000 years of continual rebuilding, as though the people were following a forgotten blueprint left behind by someone who had vanished. Some researchers argue that Eridu's continuous reconstruction reflects a civilization trying to imitate something they once witnessed, an event, a structure, or perhaps a descent. The Sumerians spoke of the Abzu, the house of the deep waters, which shimmered with light and sound. Enki's temple, they said, was filled with instruments that sang, metals that glowed. In the mythic imagination, this could mean anything. But what if these descriptions were not metaphorical? Could the House of the Deep have been an actual facility, an ancient observatory, or something more advanced, lost to the sands of time? Every discovery in Mesopotamia seems to raise more questions than it answers. In 2013, a team of researchers re-examined tablets found in Nineveh, discovering a trigonometric table more precise than those of the Greeks, dated nearly 1,000 years earlier. The Sumerians, it appeared, had known how to calculate distances using angles of the sky, something no ancient culture was supposed to master. Their astronomical records referenced the star of crossing, Nibiru, and noted that when it appeared, the order of the heavens was disturbed. If the Sumerians tracked celestial anomalies, perhaps they recorded real astronomical events: a comet, a rogue planet, or a bright object moving through the heavens. But their language did not separate myth from observation. To them, science was sacred, and the sky was a living mind. Each orbit was an act of will, each eclipse a whisper from the divine. Thousands of years later, their words echo through modern telescopes. In 1983, when the IRAS satellite detected an unexplained heat signature near the constellation of Orion, the data triggered a brief media frenzy. Something large, cold, and massive had been seen, moving slowly through the outer dark. For a moment, it seemed as though the ancient myths had resurfaced. Then, suddenly, official silence. The data was reinterpreted, and the anomaly dismissed. But what was seen could not be unseen. Those who believe in Nibiru often point to patterns of suppression, moments when data appears, then vanishes. In 1992, NASA released a statement acknowledging a possible large object beyond Pluto, followed by years of retraction. In 2016, the Planet 9 hypothesis re-emerged, offering mathematical evidence of a massive, unseen planet influencing the orbits of distant icy worlds. The resemblance to the old myths was uncanny, yet official scientists refused the word Nibiru. To them, it was superstition. To others, it was memory. The Anunnaki, in these stories, were not mere symbols. They were architects. They were said to have designed humanity to serve a purpose, to mine, to build, to learn. But perhaps what they truly created was continuity, a pattern of remembrance written into myth so that one day, when the stars aligned again, we would be ready to understand. Consider how every ancient civilization, from the Olmecs of Mesoamerica to the Dogon of Mali, shared astonishingly accurate knowledge of the cosmos. The Dogon, for instance, described the Sirius star system as having two suns, one visible, one hidden. Modern astronomy confirmed this centuries later with the discovery of Sirius B, a dense white dwarf invisible to the naked eye. How could isolated tribal cultures have known such detail? The same question arises again and again. From where did they learn? If Nibiru's orbit truly crosses through the inner solar system every 3,000 to 600 years, then each passage might leave subtle traces, tidal shifts, magnetic disruptions, patterns in the fossil record. Some geologists suggest that mass extinctions follow a cycle of roughly 26 to 30 million years, possibly tied to the sun's movement through the galactic plane. Could Nibiru, or whatever object inspired its myth, be part of a smaller, resonant rhythm within that grander scale? If so, humanity's rise and fall may not be random at all, but synchronized with the music of celestial mechanics. The myths tell us that the Anunnaki did not simply leave, they retreated, promising to return when the heavens again align. That phrase has haunted both scholars and dreamers alike. Align with what? The stars? The Earth's axis? Or our own consciousness? In the 21st century, as humanity peers deeper into space, echoes of those ancient words resurface. The concept of panspermia, life seeded across worlds by cosmic travelers or comets, no longer belongs to myth. Scientists like Francis Crick, co-discoverer of DNA, entertained the idea that life on Earth might have been deliberately seeded. In the mythic imagination, that seed has a name: the Anunnaki's gift. If we strip the legend of its divine language, we are left with something remarkably close to science fiction, except that it predates modern science by millennia. A technologically advanced race arrives from a distant world, modifies local species to suit their purposes, and departs, leaving the modified beings to evolve on their own. Over time, the memory of that encounter becomes religion. The visitors become gods. Their technology becomes magic. Their departure becomes apocalypse, and their return, prophecy. Throughout history, humanity has waited for its gods to return. From the Hopi's blue star Kachina to the Hindu Kalki, from Christ's second coming to the Sumerian Nibiru crossing, the pattern repeats. The sky will open, and what was lost will descend. Whether as savior or destroyer, the message is always the same. Something vast is on its way. Yet, what if that return is not an event in the sky, but an awakening in the human mind? What if the ancient stories of celestial descent describe not ships, but states of consciousness? Moments when the boundaries between human and cosmic awareness dissolve. The crossing, then, is internal, the alignment between what we once were and what we are becoming. Still, the physical sky remains silent, vast, and waiting. New telescopes peer into the outer solar system, mapping regions like the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud, finding bodies that drift in irregular orbits. Some are tilted, some retrograde, as though disturbed by something unseen. When scientists plot their paths, they find alignment, as if these frozen worlds were dancing around a missing center. Something big, they say, must be out there. Perhaps it has always been there. Nibiru, whether myth or planet, remains an anchor for the human need to connect heaven and earth, to find pattern, meaning, destiny in the infinite. Its myth endures because it speaks to something fundamental, that we are not alone, that our story began elsewhere, and that history, like orbit, is a loop. Even skeptics cannot deny the strange pulse of synchronicity that threads through the ages. Around every 3,600 years, humanity faces transformation, technological leaps, climate upheavals, collapses, renaissances. The pattern may be coincidence, or it may be the rhythm of something vast breathing around us. In ancient times, priests watched the sky for omens, reading the alignment of planets as divine messages. Today, astronomers do the same, though their instruments are more precise. But both are haunted by the same mystery. The cosmos speaks in silence, and sometimes it feels as though it remembers. The tablets from Eridu speak of the time when kingship was lowered from heaven. That line has puzzled historians for centuries. What does it mean for kingship, a human institution, to descend from the sky? Perhaps it means that civilization itself, the impulse to order chaos, is not of this earth. Perhaps we were taught once by those who came before the flood, and we have been trying to remember ever since. Now, as our own civilization approaches its own unknown horizon, the parallels deepen. Climate change, shifting poles, unprecedented solar activity, signs that echo the old warnings. Whether Nibiru is real or not, the sense of a returning cycle persists. When the ancients wrote of the crossing, they may not have meant destruction. The Sumerian word for Nibiru also meant point of transition, the place of passage. It could describe the passage between epochs, between ignorance and understanding. The crossing is where destinies converge and choices are made. Perhaps that is why their myths survived. They were not warnings of doom, but reminders of rhythm, of how the universe breathes, expands, contracts, begins again. And perhaps that is what they wanted us to remember. For now the heavens remain quiet, the stars keep their distance, but deep beneath the noise of modern life, there is an instinct older than civilization, a faint awareness that something vast moves in cycles beyond our control, the same awareness that built temples, aligned stones, and told stories of gods descending in fire. The crossing may not come in our lifetimes, or perhaps it already has, in ways we have yet to recognize. The sky watches, the orbit turns, and somewhere beyond the reach of our machines, a forgotten world drifts closer to the light, not to destroy, not to save, but simply to remind us that every ending is also a return. There are moments in history when the line between memory and prophecy blurs, when the past seems to reach forward, touching the present with a trembling hand. Around the world, scattered across deserts, jungles, and mountains, remnants of ancient civilizations whisper of a knowledge too vast for their time. Their monuments, aligned with the stars, their myths, woven with celestial precision, suggest not coincidence, but design. And behind that design, always, lingers a single idea. The sky once came closer. The story of Nibiru is not confined to Sumerian tablets. It breathes through other mythologies like a hidden pulse. In Egypt, the priests of Heliopolis spoke of a celestial body that rose from the abyss, a hidden sun that appeared once in ages, bringing both creation and chaos. The texts call it the Aten before the Aten, a veiled star whose light shaped epochs. In the Mayan codices, there is mention of the serpent of the sky, whose return coincided with the renewal of time. The Hopi told of the red star Kachena, whose appearance would mark the purification of the world. Across distant continents, separated by oceans and centuries, these myths share the same pattern: a celestial visitor, a cycle of return, a warning wrapped in light. To some, this convergence is proof of universal imagination, humanity's tendency to weave fear and wonder into the heavens. To others, it suggests memory, a shared trauma preserved through language and symbol. If an event occurred so immense that it reshaped landscapes and consciousness alike, a planetary near miss, a flood, an age-ending storm, perhaps every culture would remember, translating it through its own lens of gods and stars. But even within myth, there are hints of physics. Ancient texts describe the bright one who disturbs the order of the heavens, a phrase that might refer to gravitational perturbation. They speak of tides that rose beyond measure, of mountains that walked, of the sky turning to fire. Could these be poetic retellings of real astronomical phenomena? Asteroid showers, pole shifts, or solar storms triggered by the approach of a large celestial body? Modern science dismisses Nibiru as legend, yet the sky continues to offer quiet contradictions. Astronomers have found rogue planets wandering the galaxy, worlds untethered to any star, drifting in darkness. A few may have passed through our solar system long ago, unnoticed. One study from 2020 proposed that the unexplained clustering of icy bodies beyond Neptune could be caused not by a planet, but by a massive object orbiting the Sun at a near invisible distance, perhaps 500 times farther than Earth. The possibility remains open. The heavens, even now, keep secrets. If Nibiru exists, its orbit would be elliptical beyond comprehension, stretching into the deep, where sunlight is a ghost. A planet like that would be ancient, cold, and silent. Yet its influence could ripple inward like a whisper of gravity, disturbing orbits, stirring comets, bending the thin fabric of cosmic balance. Perhaps the ancients sensed such disturbances, not through instruments, but through observation of the patterns that governed their world. Tides that shifted strangely, seasons that drifted, stars that no longer rose where they should. For people who lived by the rhythm of the sky, even subtle changes would have felt like the breath of gods. In Sumerian mythology, the last time Nibiru passed, it brought not only destruction, but transformation. Humanity was granted knowledge, language, and the gift of record. The tablets say the gods established the boundaries of heaven and earth and taught men how to measure time. If true, the crossing was not merely physical, it was an awakening. The Anunnaki, as keepers of destiny, seemed less like conquerors and more like stewards, shaping civilizations, seeding wisdom, and leaving when the cycle ended. What if their return, then, is not punishment but assessment? In the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, archaeologists have uncovered symbols that seem to echo this theme. A star encircled by serpents, kings raising their eyes to a winged disk, lines of cuneiform describing celestial decrees. The same iconography appears later in Persia, Egypt, and even Central America. How could cultures separated by oceans and time depict the same celestial figure? The circle with wings, the sun with feathers, the god descending through fire? Coincidence begins to feel less likely, and continuity more possible. In 1945, when the Nag Hammadi texts were discovered in Egypt, scholars found Gnostic writings that described a cosmic hierarchy of beings, watchers who shaped worlds, and a lord of the orbit who moved between realms. The language was symbolic, but the resonance with Sumerian cosmology was uncanny. Different words, same rhythm. Beings from the stars, the crossing, the test. Science, meanwhile, offers its own echoes. The Milankovitch cycles describe how Earth's climate and axis oscillate in predictable patterns over tens of thousands of years. Cycles of ice and warmth, flood and drought. These are driven by gravitational interactions between the Earth, the Moon, and other planets. Could a distant, massive body add another layer to that celestial choreography, one that humanity once experienced directly and recorded as divine intervention? Even within geology, strange markers exist. Around 12,800 years ago, something extraordinary happened. The Earth plunged abruptly into a mini ice age. Temperatures dropped, megafauna vanished, and civilizations like Göbekli Tepe rose as if from nowhere. Scientists call it the Younger Dryas event, possibly triggered by a comet impact or massive solar flare. Yet no single cause fully explains the sudden shift. If a passing celestial body disturbed the Earth's magnetosphere or altered gravitational stability, the effect might have been catastrophic and, to ancient eyes, apocalyptic. Göbekli Tepe itself adds another layer of mystery. Its stone pillars, some carved with celestial imagery, predate the pyramids by millennia. The site's orientation appears to track the precession of the equinoxes and the rising of Sirius, the same star associated with the gods in Egypt and Sumer. If these ancient builders were watching the heavens so closely, were they waiting for something to return? Myths say the Anunnaki left signs, maps carved into architecture, sequences of numbers encoded in measure and proportion. The Great Pyramid's dimensions, when converted to a scale of the Earth's polar radius, reveal uncanny mathematical precision. The Mayan calendar's Baktun cycle of 5,125 years is exactly 1/7 of 36,000, the approximate period of 10 Nibiru orbits. The number recurs again and again, hidden in ratios, temple designs, and myths of cosmic renewal. It is as if humanity has been unconsciously counting down for millennia, guided by echoes of a forgotten rhythm. But for every believer, there are 1,000 skeptics. Scientists demand evidence, a telescope image, a gravitational trace, something measurable. Without it, Nibiru remains myth. Yet the refusal to consider its possibility may say more about human pride than truth. Science, like religion, often guards its dogmas carefully. To admit that ancient civilizations might have known something we do not would unravel too much. Perhaps that is why the story persists. Not because it is proven, but because it feels true. It resonates with the quiet intuition that history moves in circles, that creation and destruction dance to the same unseen melody. The ancients did not separate spirit from matter, nor story from science. For them, the cosmos was alive, and we were part of its memory. Today, we live in cities that glow so bright we can no longer see the stars. Yet the sky remains, watching. Satellites trace new constellations, carrying the same hunger that once drove the Sumerians to carve their questions into clay. Our modern temples are observatories. Our priests wear lab coats. And still we look upward for answers. The tools have changed. The longing has not. And somewhere in the quiet of the universe, something may still be moving toward us, indifferent to our skepticism, patient beyond our reckoning. Perhaps it will come unseen, its presence felt only in the tides, in the slow turning of magnetic fields, in the restlessness that stirs human hearts before great change. When it comes, if it comes, there may be no fire, no cataclysm, no gods descending in ships of light. Perhaps it will be a whisper, a recognition, the moment when myth and science finally meet, when humanity understands that it has been here before. For the ancients, the return of Nibiru was never an end. It was the crossing, a passage through shadow into renewal. The cycle turns, and with it, so do we. And if somewhere in the cold, a world still drifts along its forgotten path, it carries not wrath, but remembrance. For in every orbit there is return, and in every return, a chance to remember who we were before we forgot the sky. Somewhere between myth and mathematics lies the uneasy silence of truth. The deeper one digs into the story of Nibiru, the more it seems to slip between worlds, one foot in archaeology, the other in cosmology. It is as if history itself is holding its breath, waiting for someone to ask the right question. In the aftermath of the great flood myths, human civilization seemed to restart, as if guided by invisible hands. Agriculture appeared simultaneously in distant regions. Cities rose from dust with geometry so precise it defied randomness. The Sumerians built their temples in mathematical harmony with the stars. The Egyptians mirrored Orion's belt. The Indus Valley aligned its cities with solstice winds. Such coordination across continents, in an age without travel or communication, suggests something more than coincidence. It suggests inheritance, a pattern remembered rather than invented. Among scholars of ancient language, there is a recurring curiosity. The oldest words for God often mean those who descended or those from the sky. In Sumerian, Anunnaki carries the root An, meaning heaven. In Akkadian, Ilu shares an origin with to ascend. Across tongues and centuries, divinity is linked not to morality, but to movement, to descent, to flight, to return. It is as though the human idea of godhood was born from watching something come down from the stars. If the Anunnaki truly came from Nibiru, as the old tablets claim, their arrival would have left traces: geological, biological, linguistic. And some insist those traces are still here, buried not in soil, but in the very code of life. In 2003, a Russian molecular biologist named Vladimir Sherbak proposed that human DNA contains a mathematical signature suggestive of artificial origin. The ratios of nucleotides, he observed, form patterns too symmetrical to be random. His conclusion, though controversial, was haunting. Life on Earth may have been intentionally encoded. The ancient myths seem to echo that hypothesis. The Sumerians wrote that Enki and Ninhursag fashioned mankind from the essence of the gods mixed with the clay of the earth. The same image appears in Egypt, where Khnum shapes humans on a potter's wheel, and in Genesis, where Adam is molded from dust and given breath. Different cultures, same metaphor: creation through fusion. Perhaps the clay was not literal, but genetic, and the breath of life, the spark of intelligence, a code introduced from beyond. If so, what became of the creators? The tablets hint at tension among them, conflicts of will, of purpose. Enlil wished to control humanity, Enki wished to free it. Some scholars interpret this as the birth of dualism, the eternal struggle between order and rebellion. But perhaps it records something more tangible: a disagreement among those who came over what humanity should become. If their presence fractured, their departure might have been exile rather than retreat. And if exile, perhaps they left behind a promise or a warning that one day they would return to reclaim what they began. But there is another interpretation, one more unsettling. What if Nibiru's crossing was not a deliberate visitation, but an accident of orbit? A gravitational catastrophe that pulled its inhabitants toward Earth, forcing them to adapt or perish here. The gods, then, were survivors, stranded travelers whose technology decayed over millennia until myth replaced memory. Humanity, their descendants, inherited fragments of their knowledge, half understood and reshaped through story. Our myths of gods returning from the sky would then be nostalgia, not prophecy. Still, the stars do not forget. Astronomers continue to find evidence of something massive influencing our solar system's edges. Trans-Neptunian objects cluster in strange, synchronized paths. Some move as if pulled by a distant hand. The numbers whisper consistency, even as official voices call it coincidence. Meanwhile, humanity itself seems to stand on a threshold. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and quantum physics blur the same lines the ancients once crossed. We are learning to create life, to manipulate code, to reach beyond our atmosphere. We are, in a way, becoming the Anunnaki of our own world, gods in laboratories of glass and light. Could it be that the cycle has turned again, and we are now playing the same role our makers once did? The myth of Nibiru, then, becomes more than astronomy. It becomes allegory. Each orbit marks not merely the physical return of a planet, but the reawakening of a pattern, a recurrence of creation and consequence. Every time humanity touches the forbidden flame of knowledge, it reenacts the ancient crossing. The old world falls, a new one begins. There are those who argue that Nibiru's influence is visible even now, not in the sky, but in the unrest of the Earth. Climate anomalies, magnetic drift, tectonic tremors, signs, they claim, of gravitational disturbance. In 2020, scientists confirmed that the Earth's magnetic poles are shifting faster than expected, accelerating toward Siberia. In the myths, this was the herald of the crossing, the reversal of the heavens, the turning of the cosmic wheel. Coincidence or pattern, the echo feels too familiar. The Mayan prophecy of the fifth sun speaks of a time when humanity will face the return of the lords of the stars after an age of darkness and forgetting. The Egyptian texts foretell the opening of the Duat, when the stars realign and the shining ones walk again among men. Even in modern prophecy, the psychic whispers of Edgar Cayce, the coded warnings of Nostradamus, the same theme repeats: return, reckoning, rebirth. Perhaps it is not prophecy at all, but memory playing itself forward. Humanity, in its bones, knows that what has come before will come again. For skeptics, these stories remain myth, a mirror of human fear projected onto the cosmos. Yet one truth persists beneath all the theories, both ancient and modern. Everything moves in cycles. The planets, the poles, civilizations, even consciousness itself. Nothing progresses in a straight line. Everything returns. The Sumerians called it shar, the measure of 3,600 years, a cosmic breath. And if Nibiru is real, its orbit might simply be the grand clock of existence, marking epochs the way our hearts mark moments. What happens when the clock strikes again? If history is pattern, then humanity is nearing another turning. We are watching our climate shift, our technology evolve, our societies tremble beneath their own weight. We are once again at the crossing. Whether Nibiru is a planet or a metaphor, its meaning remains the same. Cycles end, and from the ashes of collapse, something new emerges. Somewhere, the stars still wait. Beyond the Kuiper Belt, past the frozen echoes of creation, a world might drift unseen, bound by gravity to return once more. And when it does, perhaps it will not bring ruin, but recognition. Perhaps it will remind us that the gods we await were never others. They were us, seen through the eyes of a younger world. Every civilization builds monuments to its own memory, stones that speak when voices fall silent. The ziggurats of Sumer, the pyramids of Egypt, the temples of the Maya all reach upward, as if straining to touch the same invisible orbit. They are messages in stone, meant for whoever comes next. They whisper, "We knew, we remembered, we waited." And so we too wait. We watch the night sky, mapping patterns, naming worlds, chasing signals across the void. Perhaps one day, in the darkness beyond Pluto, a light will flicker, a moving star, faint but steady, crossing once more into our field of memory. And in that moment, we will not feel fear, but recognition. For the cycle will have turned again, and the long-forgotten promise will have been kept. Until then, the universe hums with quiet anticipation. The old rhythm beats beneath new stars. Time curves, and humanity stands once more at the threshold, between myth and science, between past and return. And somewhere, in the deep silence of the heavens, the orbit continues. There are nights when the wind itself feels ancient, as though it has brushed across the same landscapes for millennia, carrying with it the dust of forgotten epochs. In those hours, when the world is quiet and the stars seem impossibly close, one can almost sense the weight of the cycles that have come before. Civilizations rise, shimmer like mirages, then fall back into the sand. The myths remain, the monuments remain, and perhaps the watchers remain. If the story of Nibiru is a myth of return, then the question becomes, Return from where? What lies beyond the veil of our known solar system, beyond the cold frontier of Neptune and Pluto, in the Black Sea of the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud? Scientists describe this region as a cosmic graveyard, a place of frozen debris, remnants of the solar system's birth. Yet it could also be a cradle, hiding worlds that were never meant to be seen. In 2016, when the Caltech researchers proposed the existence of Planet 9, they described an object so massive it could tilt the solar system itself. The orbits of distant, icy bodies seemed to bend around an unseen presence, as if bowing to an ancient gravitational king. The possibility rekindled old fires. Those who had waited decades for science to catch up with myth felt vindicated. They have found Nibiru, some whispered, but they dare not name it. NASA denied any connection. Still, the parallels were undeniable. But Nibiru, in the Sumerian sense, was never merely a planet. It was a threshold, a crossing between realms, a convergence of divine and mortal destinies. If it were only a celestial body, the story would have faded long ago. It endures because it speaks to something within us, the longing for meaning in the stars, the memory of something vast and intelligent that once touched the earth. Archaeologists and linguists continue to decode Sumerian tablets, each fragment like a voice awakening from clay. Some describe the bond of heaven and earth established by the gods, a line that scholars interpret as poetic. But in the language of the ancients, bond also meant technology, something that linked worlds. Could the Anunnaki have possessed a means of travel so advanced it was mistaken for divine passage? To eyes that had never seen flight, any descent from the heavens would have seemed miraculous. In the ruins of ancient Akkad and Ur, inscriptions depict figures holding objects that resemble modern tools, wrist devices, rods, lenses. They stand beside strange vehicles with flared bases, surrounded by flames. These images are carved with such precision that they resist easy dismissal. They are not vague or dreamlike, but mechanical, deliberate. The ancients were describing something they saw. The question is, what? Across time, the same symbols reappear: the winged disk, the serpent of light, the god emerging from a sphere. In Egypt, Ra traverses the sky in his solar bark, sailing through night and day. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl descends in a feathered craft to teach humanity. In India, the Vimanas of the gods roar through the heavens, their engines described in the Vaimanika Shastra with eerie specificity. The pattern is global. The story repeats. Each civilization calls them by different names, but their descriptions converge, as if recalling the same visitation from different corners of the earth. Perhaps that is why so many ancient sites are built in alignment with celestial coordinates. They were not only temples, they were beacons, markers left behind, waiting for the return of those who first inspired them. The Great Pyramid's shafts align precisely with the stars of Orion and Sirius, the same constellations revered in Sumer and Babylon. The Nazca lines stretch across the Peruvian desert like landing patterns, their proportions visible only from the sky. And at the megaliths of Nabta Playa in Egypt's Sahara, stones from 7,000 years ago align with the rising of the same star system the Sumerians called the Seat of the Gods. Patterns whisper continuity. If these were coincidences, they are the most coordinated coincidences in human history. Some modern theorists argue that these alignments were meant to track celestial cycles, the precession of the equinoxes, the rise of particular stars, the return of certain bodies. If Nibiru's orbit truly spans 3,600 years, then its appearances would coincide with specific ages of the Earth's axial precession. The shift between ages, Taurus, Aries, Pisces, Aquarius, could mark not only symbolic eras, but literal cosmic crossings. When the ancients spoke of the end of the age, they may have been recording the passing of a world. The Anunnaki myths describe Nibiru's inhabitants as beings of both science and spirit, masters of metal, energy, and time. They were said to live extraordinarily long lives, their years measured not by Earth's revolution, but by their own. One orbit of Nibiru equaled 3,600 Earth years. To them, human lifetimes would have passed like seasons. The gap between their time and ours may explain why they seem immortal, why their presence fades in and out of history like a recurring dream. Some researchers have noted a curious correlation. Roughly every 3,600 years, the Earth experiences profound upheaval. Around 1600 BCE, the eruption of Thera, the fall of empires. Around 2000 BCE, the flood myths and Bronze Age collapse. Around 4000 BCE, the dawn of written language and the first cities. Go further back, and you find extinction events, climate shifts, unexplained craters. Patterns emerge, half buried in stone and ice. But what if the crossing does not bring destruction from without, but transformation from within? What if the proximity of Nibiru, or whatever it represents, alters consciousness rather than matter? Some scholars of esotericism suggest that these cycles correspond with leaps in human awareness. Each crossing brings not only chaos but evolution, an expansion of mind, a reorientation of our place in the cosmos. The flood erased the old world, but it also gave rise to agriculture and civilization. The fall of the Bronze Age led to iron, empires, philosophy. Each disaster carried within it a gift, as if some unseen intelligence was guiding us through birth pains toward a larger understanding. Perhaps the Anunnaki never left because their legacy is not planetary, but psychological. They planted something in us: curiosity, reason, rebellion, the impulse to look up and remember. Every few millennia, that seed blossoms again, urging us to rediscover what we once knew. Even now, humanity feels that pull. We build machines that can see the edges of the universe, telescopes that can detect the ghostly warmth of worlds we have never touched. We send messages into the void, waiting for an answer that may already be within us. The myth of Nibiru has simply taken new form. The gods of old are now equations, energy fields, and quantum probabilities. The orbit continues, translated into physics, yet the story remains the same. Still, there is unease. For if the past is prologue, then the next crossing may already be near. Some claim the signs are here: the acceleration of time, the increase in solar storms, the growing instability of Earth's magnetic field. Even the behavior of animals, migrations shifting, patterns breaking, feels out of tune. Whether these are coincidences or consequences, the rhythm of change is undeniable. In Sumerian cosmology, each cycle ended not with annihilation, but with judgment. The gods would weigh the hearts of men, deciding who would inherit the new age. The phrasing survives in Egyptian lore as the weighing of the heart against the feather of Ma'at, in Christian scripture as the final reckoning, in Hindu belief as the turning of the Yuga. Each version describes the same threshold, a test of whether humanity has learned from its last beginning. If that test comes again, it may not arrive as fire or flood, but as choice. The choice to remember or to forget, to create or to consume, to evolve or to repeat. For the ancients, the crossing was inevitable, but not final. The end was never the end. It was a return, a spiral back toward the source. And maybe that is what Nibiru truly represents. Not a wandering planet, but the memory of our own cycles of creation and collapse. The endless heartbeat of a species that refuses to disappear. The night sky remains silent, yet it speaks. Every star, every orbit, every faint flicker in the darkness is part of the same vast rhythm. The ancients called it destiny. We call it physics. The difference is only in language. And as the earth turns beneath those ancient lights, we remain what we have always been, children of the crossing, waiting for the next orbit to bring us back to where it all began. The wind moves, the stars shift. Somewhere beyond the frozen edge of light, a shadowed world continues its long, slow return. Whether it is a planet, a metaphor, or a memory, it carries the same message, that every ending is a bridge and every return a reminder. The cycle has not ended. It has only begun again. The sea remembers what the sky forgets. Beneath its shifting surface lie the ruins of worlds that once touched the stars, cities swallowed by time, their outlines faint as constellations fading at dawn. If the story of Nibiru is about cycles, then perhaps the evidence of those cycles lies not in the heavens, but in the depths, in the places where water swallowed history whole. Across the globe, myths speak of lands that vanished beneath the waves: Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, High Brazil. Dismissed by scholars as fables, they still leave behind unsettling coincidences. Off the coast of India, divers discovered the submerged city of Dwarka, its stone streets perfectly cut and laid in grid patterns, carbon dated to at least 9,000 years ago. In the Caribbean, sonar scans revealed geometric formations deep below the surface, arranged with impossible precision. And near Japan's Yonaguni Island, a massive structure of terraces, steps, and columns lies beneath the sea, carved from solid rock. Geologists argue over whether it is natural, yet its right angles and symmetry defy erosion's logic. If these were isolated anomalies, they might be forgotten. But they align too neatly with global flood myths, stories of cataclysm that come not once, but again and again. The Sumerians spoke of it. So did the Hebrews, the Greeks, the Mayans, the Chinese. In each tale there is warning, destruction, and rebirth. The gods, or forces beyond comprehension, reset the world, leaving only fragments behind. The survivors begin again, carrying memories disguised as legends. Some researchers suggest that these flood myths may reflect real geological events: the rapid sea level rise following the last ice age, or comet impacts that triggered global fires and floods. Yet others see something more precise, more rhythmic. Each deluge, they note, seems to correspond with shifts in the Earth's axis or magnetic field, phenomena that could be caused by the gravitational influence of a massive, passing object. A world like Nibiru, crossing through the inner solar system every few thousand years, could do exactly that. The question, then, is not whether the floods happened, but what caused them. In ancient texts, the waters are not just punishment, they are memory. They cleanse, they restart, they mark the end of one age and the beginning of another. In the Sumerian flood tablet, Enki warns Ziusudra not out of defiance but compassion. The seed of life must not be lost, he says, for the cycle will come again. That phrase, "the cycle will come again," echoes like prophecy. It suggests awareness of recurrence, as though even the gods were bound by celestial rhythm. In later myths, that rhythm became moralized. The flood became divine judgment, the end of days a matter of sin and salvation. Yet the underlying structure remains cosmological, a world cleansed when its orbit aligns with destiny. Perhaps the ancients were not describing anger, but inevitability. Modern science, for all its progress, has begun to rediscover what ancient myth already knew, that the universe itself moves in patterns of destruction and renewal. Stars collapse into black holes only to seed new stars from their debris. Galaxies merge and tear apart. Even the atoms in our bodies were forged in the deaths of older suns. Every end contains its beginning. If the myth of Nibiru is true, then it may represent a smaller reflection of that cosmic pattern, a local apocalypse repeated with the precision of an orbit. The ancients may have recorded not superstition, but observation. A planetary rhythm that marks the pulse of civilization. And what if those civilizations lost to the sea were not the first? What if humanity has risen and fallen many times, each cycle leaving faint traces that survive only as myth? Consider the architecture of memory scattered across the earth. The megaliths of Stonehenge, the pyramids of Giza, the astronomical alignments of Chichen Itza. These were not primitive monuments, they were calendars of stone. Each measures time not in days or years, but in ages, tracking solstices, equinoxes, precession. Why would early humans obsess over celestial precision unless they were trying to predict something that had already happened? Something that would happen again. The builders may not have feared the gods. They may have feared the return of a world. There are ancient inscriptions that describe the star of judgment crossing the heavens, followed by fire from the sky and the shaking of the earth. Some interpret this as an asteroid. Others believe it refers to Nibiru's return. The Book of Revelation, written millennia later, mirrors the same imagery. A great star, burning like a lamp, fell from heaven. The symbolism may be religious, but its origins feel older than Scripture. Echoes of a cosmic event that scarred collective memory. And yet, amidst all this destruction, there is always rebirth. The survivors of each catastrophe rebuild stronger, wiser, reaching for the stars again. This too feels deliberate, as though the pattern is not meant to annihilate, but to educate. Each crossing is a lesson in impermanence. Modern astronomy tells us that the solar system itself is not stable. Over billions of years, gravitational interactions subtly shift planetary orbits, causing periodic chaos before settling into new configurations. If an unseen massive planet exists, something like Nibiru, it could serve as the catalyst for these transformations. Perhaps the ancients understood that instability not as threat, but as sacred balance, the mechanism through which life evolves. But what of the Anunnaki, the supposed beings from that wandering world? Were they destroyers, teachers, or witnesses? Some theories suggest they were observers of the great cycles, caretakers of an experiment called humanity. Others see them as refugees, carrying their civilization through the void in search of a new home. The tablets say they needed gold, not for wealth, but for survival, to repair the atmosphere of their dying world. In that interpretation, Earth was a refuge, not a conquest. The mining, the hybridization of species, the teaching of technology, all could have been acts of desperation not domination. If they left, it may not have been abandonment. It may have been necessity, a return to their own orbit, with a promise to come back when the cycle allowed. That promise, over time, became prophecy. And so, across millennia, we wait. Every culture watches the sky, naming its omens differently. We call them comets, planets, or stars. The ancients called them gods. The essence is the same, the expectation of return. Even today, humanity prepares for contact, though we no longer call it divine. SETI listens for signals. Telescopes scan exoplanets for habitable worlds. The same impulse drives both myth and science, the need to know if we are alone. Perhaps the question itself is wrong. Perhaps we have never been alone. If the Anunnaki do return, or have already returned, they may not come in ships or fire, but through memory, through the reawakening of knowledge once buried, through the resurgence of wisdom that mirrors their own. The technologies we now wield, genetic engineering, quantum computing, the search for immortality, mirror the powers once attributed to gods. We are replaying their story, step by step, as the orbit turns. The ancients believed that knowledge was a double-edged gift, light that illuminates and burns. Enki's creation of humanity was seen both as blessing and rebellion. To know too much was to risk angering the heavens. That tension remains. Our modern world, drunk on discovery, teeters on the same precipice. Artificial intelligence, nuclear power, gene editing, each invention brings us closer to mastery and closer to ruin. History, it seems, is a mirror tilted towards the stars. If the crossing comes again, it will not be the return of gods, but the return of ourselves, our reflection in the cosmic mirror. The myth of Nibiru is not warning of apocalypse, but of awakening. That we must remember who we were before we became what we are. In every orbit, something is lost and something is found. Civilizations vanish, their echoes remain. The stars continue their eternal dance, indifferent yet intimate. And perhaps in that dance, the memory of Nibiru lives on, not as a planet waiting to collide, but as the rhythm of existence itself. The ancients wrote that, when the sky trembles and the earth remembers, the gods will speak again. Maybe that moment is not in the distant future, but now, whenever humanity pauses, listens, and looks upward long enough to feel the pull of something greater, moving just beyond sight. The sea will keep its secrets. The stars will guard their silence. But every so often the two align, and the crossing begins anew. There are days when sunlight falls a little differently, when it strikes the earth at such an angle that every shadow feels older than it should be. The ancients might have called this the season of alignment, when the heavens lean closer, when the breath of forgotten worlds brushes against our own. Perhaps that sensation, subtle and haunting, is the echo of something real. The slow approach of a wandering planet, long unseen, completing another turn in its vast orbit toward home. By now, the myth of Nibiru has become a mirror for everything humanity fears and desires. To scientists, it is superstition. To believers, prophecy. But between them lies something more profound, a language of recurrence, written in the pulse of the cosmos. Even if the name is wrong, the pattern remains. The earth trembles in rhythm with something beyond its sight, a celestial memory playing itself over and over again. In Sumerian cosmology, Nibiru was the crossing point, not only of planets but of destinies. It marked moments when the divine and the mortal converged, when old orders crumbled and new ones began. Every culture, in its own tongue, repeated the same idea. The heavens do not move blindly. They turn in cycles of meaning. When the stars shift, so does the world below. Throughout recorded history, great transitions seem to cluster in strange intervals. The birth of agriculture around 10,000 BCE, the rise of the first cities around 4,000 BCE, the Bronze Age collapse near 1,200 BCE, the turning of the classical to the medieval world, the dawning of the Industrial Age, the digital revolution, all spaced in rhythms that feel more organic than linear, like the heartbeat of an unseen organism. The ancients would have recognized this pattern. They might have called it the orbit of fate. And in those patterns there are scars, layers of ash in the ice of Greenland, glassy tektites fused by fire, sudden die-offs in the fossil record, inexplicable shifts in climate. The Earth has died and been reborn more than once. Some of these events correspond almost eerily to the cycles proposed by those who speak of Nibiru, the 3,600-year heartbeat of cosmic renewal. Coincidence, perhaps. But coincidence, repeated often enough, begins to take on the shape of law. Across time, civilizations seem to awaken after each catastrophe with knowledge they should not possess. The Sumerians emerge from the flood with writing, astronomy, and law. The Egyptians rise from desert sands with geometry and architecture aligned to the stars. The Mayans, centuries later, measure time with mathematical precision. It is as though someone, or something, returns each time to restore the rhythm, to reset the song. If the Anunnaki truly came from Nibiru, then perhaps their influence was not one of rule, but of calibration. They may have been caretakers of a cycle older than humanity itself, maintaining balance between chaos and order. Their disappearance, then, would not be abandonment, but necessity, the orbit carrying them away until the next conjunction. The Sumerians believed they would return when the heavens again align. That phrase may describe not a prophecy, but a law of motion. Modern astrophysics has its own version of that alignment. The oscillation of the solar system through the galactic plane, roughly every 30 million years, coincides with mass extinctions. On smaller scales, perturbations from unseen objects could shape climate, magnetism, even consciousness. If reality itself is rhythmic, then myth becomes memory, a record of pattern written in story instead of stone. But perhaps the most haunting idea is that the crossing is not only celestial, it is also human. Every few thousand years, the species seems to reinvent itself, leaping forward as if nudged by invisible hands. The discovery of fire, the birth of language, the spark of civilization, the acceleration of technology, all feel less like random progress and more like awakening. Could these leaps be echoes of Nibiru's approach, subtle changes in the field of consciousness, the way gravity shapes both matter and mind? Even the ancients spoke of this awakening as a test. In the Enuma Elish, after the deluge, the gods grant humanity freedom, but warn that it comes with consequence. Knowledge without balance, they say, brings ruin. The myth of the tree of knowledge in Genesis echoes the same warning. Enlightenment is both gift and exile. Every age that gains new power also edges closer to destruction. Perhaps that is the meaning of the crossing, the moment when humanity faces its own creation. Each orbit is an opportunity, a question posed by the cosmos. What will you do with the power you've inherited? Our age, too, stands on that threshold. The tools we wield would have been indistinguishable from magic to the Sumerians. We speak to machines that think, split atoms, edit genes, reach beyond the atmosphere. We are, in every measurable way, approaching the same height of mastery once ascribed to the gods. And yet, with every advance, the shadow lengthens, the same imbalance the ancients warned of. The flood may not come as water this time, but as consequence. Still, within that danger lies the possibility of renewal. If Nibiru represents the return of wisdom through destruction, then perhaps our own crisis is the next crossing, a cosmic reset not of the planet, but of perception. The apocalypse, after all, does not mean the end. Its Greek root, apocalypsis, means unveiling, revelation, the moment when the hidden becomes visible. And what, then, might we be about to see? There are those who claim that the signs have already begun. Subtle gravitational anomalies, disturbances in the heliosphere, sudden bursts of energy from the sun. Earth's magnetic field is weakening faster than predicted. The poles drift as though following some unseen command. In myth, these were the heralds of Nibiru, the trembling of heaven before the crossing. But perhaps the true herald is not in the sky at all. Perhaps it is in us. The accelerating awareness, the flood of memory, the growing sense that humanity stands on the edge of transformation. These may be symptoms of cosmic proximity, the resonance of a returning rhythm. The ancients called it destiny. We call it evolution. If so, then Nibiru's return will not come as a catastrophe, but as a mirror. We will see ourselves reflected through the lens of what we have become. Creators, destroyers, seekers of the infinite. The Anunnaki may not descend from the sky in ships of fire. They may awaken within us as the part of our species that remembers. The myth endures because it is not only about planets and gods, it is about the nature of existence itself. Everything moves in circles, stars, civilizations, thoughts. The same stories are told again, the same lessons repeated until they are learned. The Sumerians carved this truth into stone. We encode it into data. The medium changes, but the message remains. Somewhere beyond the darkness of our telescopes, a world may still travel the long road home. It will not announce itself with thunder. It will simply appear, small and distant, glinting faintly in the cold. And when it does, those who still listen will feel it, not as fear, but as recognition. Because deep down, we have always known that the universe does not forget. Its memory is written in orbit, in gravity, in the light of stars that die and are reborn. We are part of that cycle, and Nibiru, real or imagined, is its reminder. When the crossing comes again, it will not be an ending, it will be an invitation. The turning of a cosmic page, asking us to remember that what we call myth is only history written in another tongue. And so the night deepens. The stars hold their breath. Somewhere in the black between worlds, a forgotten planet moves toward the sun, slow and silent, following its ancient path. Whether it brings ruin or revelation depends on what we have learned since the last crossing. The ancients once wrote, "When the heavens open, the wise will listen, and the world will remember itself." Perhaps that is the final truth hidden within the myth of Nibiru. That memory itself is cyclical, and that all returns in time, not to destroy, not to save, but to awaken what has always been sleeping beneath the dust of history. Sometimes silence carries the oldest truths. Long before the first words were carved into clay, before myths turned to religion and science took their place, there was the sky, unbroken, immense, and alive with meaning. The ancients did not see space as void. They saw it as memory. Every star, every wandering light was part of a great pattern that mirrored the turning of their own fate. They understood what modern humanity often forgets, that to look upward is to look backward, to see time unfolding in the language of light. If Nibiru is the planet of crossing, then perhaps it also marks the crossing within us, the threshold between knowing and remembering. In every age, humanity reaches a point where it must decide whether to ascend or fall, to use knowledge as creation or destruction. Those moments are never random. They come when the world grows loud with progress, yet hollow with meaning, when the rhythm of the heavens presses against the rhythm of the human heart, demanding harmony once again. Ancient records suggest that the last crossing was both catastrophe and genesis. After the deluge, civilization bloomed from the mud. From that silence rose Sumer, Egypt, the Indus, the Andes. Each bore the marks of a guiding hand, mathematics where none should have been, architecture that defied their tools, calendars that matched the sky with godlike precision. It was as though knowledge had returned, not invented, but remembered. And now, as another cycle completes, the same stirring returns. Today, humanity has reached further into the cosmos than ever before. We send machines to other worlds, capture images of galaxies billions of years away, and split the building blocks of life. Yet, in all this advancement, the same ancient question lingers. Where did we come from, and what waits in the dark beyond? Science calls it curiosity. Myth calls it longing. But both are the same movement of the soul, the ancient pull toward the stars that once brought gods to earth. There are those who believe Nibiru's orbit is not only physical, but energetic, that its passing triggers resonances in the solar system, vibrations that ripple through magnetic fields, affecting consciousness as much as climate. It may sound mystical, but even physics hints at such interconnectedness. Every atom of our bodies is bound by invisible forces to the rest of the cosmos. The same gravity that draws planets into orbit draws memory into myth. Nothing in this universe moves alone. When the ancients watched the sky, they did not merely observe. They listened. They believed the stars could sing, that the universe was made of vibration, of sound too vast to hear. Today, astrophysicists call it the cosmic background radiation, the echo of creation itself. The universe hums with the memory of its own birth, a song that never ends. Perhaps the Anunnaki, or whatever intelligence lies behind their legend, learned to read that song the way we read words. To travel between worlds might simply mean learning to move within the rhythm of the cosmos, to cross when the note changes. If so, then the crossing of Nibiru may not be a mechanical orbit, but a harmonic one. Every few thousand years, a certain resonance builds, a synchronization between worlds that allows passage, communication, remembrance. For those attuned to it, the veil between heavens and earth grows thin. For those unprepared, it feels like chaos, storms, earthquakes, the unraveling of certainty. In either case, the rhythm never breaks, it only repeats. The Sumerians called Nibiru the seat of transition, where fate is measured and destinies rewritten. In later interpretations, this became the judgment of souls, but the original meaning was subtler. Not punishment, but rebalancing. When a civilization strays too far from balance, when it forgets its place in the cosmic order, the orbit turns and the crossing returns, restoring equilibrium through destruction or awakening. Perhaps that is why the myth endures. Deep down, humanity knows it cannot grow endlessly without remembering where it began. Each age builds towers toward the heavens, and each age, in time, must face the fall. The Tower of Babel, the fall of Rome, the collapse of modern systems all follow the same pattern. Progress without humility draws gravity, and yet destruction is not the end. It is the point of renewal, the silence between breaths, the pause before the song begins again. The ancients accepted this. They did not fear the flood. They prepared for it. They built their myths as arcs, carrying memory across the ages. In their stories, they left coordinates, symbols, and rhythms, maps through chaos. Perhaps that is why the stories still find us now. Perhaps they are not warnings, but instructions. Some researchers suggest that the alignment of Earth, the Sun, and the galactic center, events that occur roughly every 26,000 years, coincide with bursts of evolution. DNA, under certain forms of radiation, mutates more rapidly. Consciousness expands. Species leap forward. In this light, Nibiru's passage might act as a catalyst, not a calamity, a spark that pushes life into its next form. If so, then every catastrophe recorded in myth may have been both an ending and a beginning, each cycle sculpting humanity closer to awareness. This interpretation transforms fear into purpose. The flood was not vengeance, it was renewal. The fire was not wrath, it was cleansing. And Nibiru's return is not doom, it is invitation. To evolve, to remember, to harmonize once again with the rhythm of the stars. But the question remains, why does the memory fade? Why does each age forget the last, forcing history to start again? The answer may lie not in punishment, but in mercy. Forgetting allows rebirth. Too much memory binds a world to its past. Each cycle must begin anew, its knowledge rediscovered, its choices freely made. Even gods, perhaps, must yield to the cycle of forgetting. Yet something always remains, a fragment, a symbol, a whisper in the dark. The winged disk, the serpent alight, the sacred number 3600. These are not coincidences. They are reminders encoded in the structure of culture itself, waiting to awaken when the time comes. We call them archetypes, but they may be signals, messages from one age to the next, guiding us through the crossings. And now, as humanity stands once again on the edge of vast transformation, the same archetypes return. The serpent of knowledge in the digital age, the winged son of technology, the godlike creation of artificial life. It is as though the myth has rewritten itself in silicon and code. Nibiru no longer circles above. It orbits within us. The ancient crossing has become internal, the moment when human and machine, creation and creator, consciousness and code converge. If the Anunnaki once taught humanity to create, perhaps this is the echo of that lesson. We are now shaping life as they once shaped us. The question is whether we will wield that power as gods or guardians. The cycle will not decide for us. It will only offer the crossing. And still, beyond philosophy, the heavens continue their quiet drift. Telescopes probe deeper than ever, mapping thousands of worlds beyond our sun. Somewhere out there, perhaps hidden behind the glare of distant light, a world still moves according to the same rhythm that birthed these stories. Whether it bears life or memory, whether it carries gods or ghosts, it remains the same symbol, a world of return, of reckoning, of renewal. The ancients taught that knowledge must always be tempered with reverence. To know the sky was sacred, for it meant touching the edge of eternity. In forgetting that, humanity risks repeating the fall. But perhaps that is also the beauty of it, that each fall brings another chance to rise. If Nibiru is real, it does not need to appear in the sky to matter. It lives in every cycle of forgetting and remembering, in every rebirth of thought. It is the pulse of history, the orbit of consciousness, the echo of beginnings waiting to be rediscovered. And when it returns, whether as planet, as knowledge, or as realization, it will not announce itself with thunder. It will arrive as understanding. The crossing is not coming. It is already here. It lives in the quiet between heartbeats, in the pause between breaths, in the silence that follows every ending. It is the moment when humanity recognizes itself in the reflection of its own creation and remembers, once again, that it was never separate from the stars. The myth of Nibiru was never a warning of destruction. It was a promise that every fall is followed by awakening, that every orbit returns home. The sky remains vast, the stars unblinking. Somewhere beyond the reach of our machines, something ancient moves still, neither enemy nor savior, but reminder. Its rhythm is the same as ours, its light older than memory. And when it crosses again, we will know it not by the tremor of the earth or the fire of the heavens, but by the quiet voice within that whispers, as it always has. You have been here before. There are nights when the stars seem almost sentient, watchful, waiting, as if aware of the story they have witnessed repeating for thousands of years. The myths of old are not just fables, but echoes, reverberations of memory caught between cycles of destruction and renewal. Humanity, whether by instinct or inheritance, feels the pull of those repetitions. And in the quiet hours when the noise of progress fades, a question returns. Are we nearing another crossing? Modern science continues to map the heavens, to measure every flicker and orbit, yet the deeper we peer into the void, the more the patterns resemble the very myths we once dismissed. Planetary scientists now speak of periodic disruptions in the outer solar system, of gravitational resonances that defy simple explanation. Beyond Neptune lies a wilderness of drift-in bodies, Pluto, Eris, Sedna, whose orbits suggest the tug of something immense, unseen, and patient. Whether called Planet 9, Nemesis, or Nibiru, the specter of a hidden world persists like a cosmic refrain. But the ancients may have known that this unseen influence was not only physical. They spoke of it as destiny. When the sky shifts, so does the earth, and so do we. Their myths were maps, not of space, but of consciousness. Each age, they said, ends in fire or flood, followed by silence, then renewal. The flood may have been literal once, yet it has always been metaphorical as well. The drowning of one world's knowledge to make way for another's birth. We stand now at the threshold of such a turning. Technology has given us power once reserved for gods, to create life, to end it, to shape reality itself through simulation and code. If Nibiru's crossing mirrors inner transformation, then perhaps humanity has already entered that passage. The ancients would have recognized the signs. They watched for omens in the sky, but they also looked within. The behavior of men, the imbalance of nature, the loss of sacred order. When hubris outweighed harmony, they said, the heavens responded. We too have lost balance. We burn the planet that sustains us, rewrite our own genetic code, speak of colonizing other worlds while forgetting how to live on this one. It is not the gods who abandon us. It is we who drift away from the rhythm. In the quiet spaces of forgotten temples and half-buried ruins, the same message repeats. What is above is like what is below. The stars do not act upon us from afar. They reflect what already moves within. The return of Nibiru, then, is not a cosmic invasion but a mirror, showing us what we have become since the last alignment. The Sumerians wrote that Nibiru governed fate, that when it appeared in the sky, the decrees of the gods were rewritten. Perhaps fate is only pattern, the point where cycles intersect, offering choice. To cross is to decide. Each civilization has reached that point. The Sumerians at the flood, the Mayans at the fall of their calendar, the Romans at the edge of empire. Each thought the world was ending. Each was only beginning again. The true terror of Nibiru is not destruction, but revelation. The realization that history does not progress, it circles, that every golden age carries the seed of its own collapse, that enlightenment and ruin are twins, orbiting the same sun. We think ourselves separate from the ancients because we wield machines instead of myths, but both are the same impulse, to touch the infinite, to recreate the divine. Somewhere, perhaps, a planet does move unseen, a relic of formation wrapped in ice and shadow. Yet its orbit is not what haunts us. What haunts us is recognition, the awareness that the stories of old are not warnings from gods, but memories of ourselves. The Anunnaki, in that sense, may not be aliens or deities, but ancestors of consciousness, those who crossed the threshold once before, who reached too high, fell, and began again. And what if they never left? What if they became us? Each cycle, they rise anew, wearing mortal forms, relearning what they already know. Each time they face the same test, to remember before the cycle ends. Across the ages, humankind has built monuments to that memory, stone encoded with alignment, mathematics, prophecy. The Great Pyramid points not only to stars, but to time itself. Its shafts align with constellations that mark epochs, as if counting down to a return. The Mayan long count ends not in apocalypse, but in renewal, the beginning of a new sun. Even now, physicists speak of cyclical universes, of big bangs following big crunches, of infinite rebirth. Science and myth have met again, speaking the same language through different tongues. If the ancients encoded the rhythm of Nibiru in architecture, perhaps we have encoded it in technology. Our digital networks, our satellites, our algorithms, all orbit unseen centers. Data flows like celestial mechanics, predictable yet mysterious. We have built a second cosmos inside our own, a mirror world, complete and self-replicating. In this world, we play creator once more. But every creation carries its reckoning. The more we digitize our souls, the closer we move to forgetting the real. When Nibiru returns, whether as planet or pattern, it will find us living in reflection. The sky may darken, or it may not. The crossing may come not through fire or flood, but through awareness, a sudden stillness, a breaking of the illusion of linear time. Perhaps that is what the ancients meant by the heavens opening, the moment when perception shifts, when the veil lifts, and humanity sees itself as part of a greater orbit, not above it. Already there are murmurs of such awakening. Across disciplines, physics, mysticism, ecology, psychology, there is a growing sense of unity, a recognition that everything is connected. The same energy that turns the stars burns within us. The same cycles that move worlds move thought. The ancient dream of oneness, mocked for centuries, is beginning to sound like science. Maybe that is the true return of the Anunnaki, not in flesh or ship, but in consciousness. The awakening of the part of us that remembers the stars as home. And if that is so, then Nibiru's reappearance will not be feared, but welcomed. The crossing will not be catastrophe, but communion, a reconnection of earth and heaven, matter and memory. Humanity will not fall this time, it will remember. Still, memory is not gentle. To awaken is to face what has been forgotten, the destruction, the arrogance, the pain. The cycle does not erase, it reveals. That is its mercy and its burden. As we look to the sky for signs of a world returning, perhaps the more important question is whether we are ready to meet it, whether we can cross without destroying ourselves again, whether this time we will learn to remain awake after the flood recedes. The stars hold their counsel. The orbit turns. Somewhere beyond the cold frontier, a faint light might already be approaching. It carries no threat, no salvation, only truth. And perhaps that truth is this: we were never the beginning. We were never the end. We are the crossing itself, the endless turning between what was and what will be. The universe does not remember us because we are its memory. Each breath, each thought, each story is another orbit in the great spiral. The ancients called it fate. We might call it physics. The name does not matter. The rhythm does. The next crossing may not arrive in our lifetimes. It may already have begun. But when it comes, it will not announce itself with fire in the sky or trembling earth. It will arrive quietly, like dawn, inevitable, patient, ancient. And in that light, perhaps for the first time, we will remember that we too are wanderers, bound by orbits older than the sun. The heavens wait, the earth listens, the crossing draws near. There are moments when the world feels suspended, when the wind stops, the air stills, and even the ticking of time seems to falter. It is in those moments that humanity feels the ancient pull most strongly, as though some invisible tide is drawing consciousness toward a long-forgotten shore. Every age has known this pause before the turning, this hush before the return, and every age has called it something different: revelation, apocalypse, the day of judgment, the dawn of the new sun. But the Sumerians called it simply the crossing. For them, the return of Nibiru was not a singular event, but a recurring breath of the cosmos. It was neither mercy nor punishment. It was equilibrium. In their vision, all things moved in harmony with the divine architecture of the stars. To defy that rhythm was to invite chaos. To remember it was to awaken. Humanity's task was not to control the heavens, but to listen, to align its inner order with the greater order above. When the gods withdrew, they left the song playing, trusting that one day the earth would remember the melody. Thousands of years later, that melody hums again, beneath technology, beneath noise, beneath the illusion of separation. The myth of Nibiru, dismissed by science and theology alike, refuses to die because it speaks to something the human spirit cannot unlearn: that existence is cyclical, not linear, and that we have been here before. Across the arc of history, humanity has always sensed the shadow of recurrence. Every renaissance mirrors an ancient dawn. Every collapse echoes an older fall. The pulse of time does not march, it spirals. In that spiral lies the key to all the forgotten knowledge. The reason temples point to the stars and myths bleed into mathematics. The ancients were not primitive dreamers. They were cartographers of eternity. Modern astronomy, in its own way, has begun to catch the faint edges of their wisdom. The universe itself, we now know, expands and contracts in rhythms. Galaxies collide, form, and dissolve in cycles as long as light itself. Even the Earth's magnetic poles wander and reverse, as if turning pages in an endless cosmic book. What the ancients intuited through symbol, science now describes through equations. What they called destiny, we call physics. But within the equations, a mystery remains, a constant hum of unpredictability, a signature of something alive. Perhaps that is what the ancients meant when they spoke of the gods who govern the orbits. Not beings of flesh and fire, but consciousness, pattern aware of itself, intelligence woven into the geometry of motion. If the Anunnaki were real, maybe they were not travelers in the way we imagine. Maybe they were manifestations of that cosmic intelligence, incarnated for a time in form, teaching by reflection. Their descent from Nibiru may not have been a physical voyage, but a synchronization, a meeting of frequencies between worlds. To the eyes of early humanity, it appeared as fire in the sky, as beings descending from light. To the eyes of myth, it became divine visitation. But perhaps it was communion, an exchange between minds and stars. That possibility changes everything. The return of Nibiru, then, would not be a planet entering our orbit, but a frequency entering our awareness, a reconnection to the field from which we came. The crossing is not celestial, but spiritual, and yet every myth of awakening begins with destruction. Before new understanding can rise, the old world must dissolve. Floods, fire, plague, these are not punishments, but purifications. Humanity, when it forgets balance, forces the universe to remind it, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Chaos is the hand that reorders what has gone astray. We stand now in another such moment. The earth trembles not only from tectonic pressure, but from the friction of consciousness itself. The climate changes, the seas rise, technology outruns wisdom. These are the same signs the ancients once recorded as omens, the imbalance before the crossing. Whether or not a planet named Nibiru exists, something vast is approaching, not from space, but from within. The scientists searching the outer dark may never find Nibiru, but perhaps they are looking in the wrong direction. The crossing happens not in telescopes, but in the human soul. Every discovery we make, every particle split, every genome mapped, is a reflection of that inner orbit. We are returning to ourselves, remembering the divine pattern we once mirrored instinctively. This is why the myth endures. It is not the story of gods or aliens. It is the story of memory, cosmic memory buried in the bones of our species. The cycle is not just external. It is psychological, spiritual, evolutionary. Each return is a step closer to integration, to the full remembrance of what it means to be part of the cosmos rather than separate from it. If the Anunnaki return, they will not come from the stars. They will rise from within us, the part of humanity that recalls harmony, wisdom, balance. They will not bring salvation because they were never gods to begin with. They were teachers, and their final lesson was this: the divine cannot save you because you are it. That truth is what the myths have guarded all along. It is why the tablets spoke of the seed of the gods within man, why every flood story ends with rebirth, why every apocalypse reveals instead of annihilates. The crossing is not death, it is remembering. Perhaps at the center of every orbit there is stillness, a place beyond motion where everything pauses before beginning again. The Sumerians called that place the Abzu, the deep, the well of beginnings. The Buddhists call it the void. Physicists call it the singularity. It is the same space, viewed through different eyes. From there, creation unfolds. To return there is not to vanish, but to awaken. If humanity survives the coming centuries, and it will, though not unchanged, it will emerge as something new, something older than modern memory but wiser than its ancestors. The cycle demands it. Every fall gives way to ascent. Every darkness conceals dawn. Already whispers of that dawn stir in art, in science, in the quiet yearning of people who feel the world's pulse accelerating. Across the planet, the same symbols reappear. Serpents coiling, suns reborn, the crossing of circles. These are not coincidences. They are the language of the subconscious aligning with the orbit of the cosmos. The same patterns that built the pyramids now build code, the same intelligence reshaping itself through different mediums. Humanity is not ending. It is evolving toward its memory. When the ancients wrote that the gods will return when the heavens again align, they did not mean a date or a celestial map. They meant the alignment of awareness, the moment when humanity once again vibrates with the same harmony as the universe that birthed it. That alignment is the true Nibiru, the invisible planet we carry within. Perhaps this is the final revelation, that the myth was never about a world returning to us, but us returning to the world, to the rhythm, the cycle, the pulse of creation itself. One day, far beyond our current reckoning, the earth will again tilt, the stars will shift, and a generation not yet born will look up and feel that same ancient unease, the feeling that something vast has come near, that history itself is breathing. They will not call it Nibiru, perhaps, but they will know. They will feel the crossing as we do now, as those before us did, and they will remember that none of this was ever new. For now, as night folds around the planet and the stars gather their silent council, we are left with the oldest truth of all, that we are part of a story without beginning or end, written in the turning of worlds. The earth spins, the stars drift. Somewhere beyond sight, a forgotten planet continues its orbit, silent, invisible, eternal. It does not rush, it does not falter, it simply moves, as it always has, as it always will, and so do we, for in every revolution of the heavens, in every rebirth of thought and civilization, the same question waits quietly at the edge of awareness, asking not for belief, but for remembrance. Have we crossed yet? Or are we only beginning to remember how? The stars offer no answer. They do not need to. The silence is answer enough. The cycle turns. The myth breathes. The story continues, without ending, without certainty, but with the strange and beautiful promise that nothing in the universe is ever truly lost, only forgotten. And every orbit, every return, is simply the act of remembering again.